My wife's family treated me like a nobody until I became wealthy. They tried to erase the prenup, so one move I made left them silent and powerless. I've been called a lot of things in my life: ambitious, stubborn, overly optimistic. But the one label I'll never forget was given to me by my wife's father the first time we met. Not in our league. He didn't say it to my face, of course. He said it in the kitchen, thinking I couldn't hear him. I was standing in the hallway, holding a bottle of decent wine I'd saved up for, trying to make a good first impression. But there it was, 4 words that summed up exactly how they saw me. At the time, I was 28, running a small marketing startup out of a cramped office that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink. We weren't struggling, but we weren't exactly Forbes cover material either. My net worth could be calculated in months until rent is late, rather than how many commas in my bank balance. My wife, then just my girlfriend, was different. Maya had this grounded, genuine warmth that didn't match the rest of her family. She grew up in a world of catered garden parties, country club memberships, and weekend ski trips to Switzerland, but she never flaunted it. If anything, she seemed embarrassed by the excess. We met at a mutual friend's launch event. She was standing by the buffet table, looking mildly horrified at the way the caterer was flambeing something dangerously close to the curtains. We started talking about how overpriced the appetizers were, and by the end of the night, I had her number. The first few months were great, but I knew the family meeting was inevitable. Maya kept pushing it off, saying things like, "They're just a lot. Let's wait until they're in a good mood." Spoiler, that day never came. When I finally met them, it was during a Sunday brunch at her parents' place, a massive colonial-style mansion with a driveway long enough to need its own zip code. Her mother, Evelyn, had a smile so polished it could have been in a toothpaste ad, but it never reached her eyes. Her father, Richard, was tall, immaculately dressed, and carried himself like a man who thought every room was his boardroom. Her younger brother, Caleb, didn't even look up from his phone when I shook his hand. The conversation was civil. First questions about my work, where I grew up, whether my parents were still together. But there was this undercurrent of judgment in every exchange, like they were silently measuring me against a checklist I hadn't been given. That's when I overheard Richard in the kitchen. I'd gone to refill my water and caught him speaking to Evelyn in a low voice. "Not in our league, Ev. Maya's just slumming it. She'll get over it." I froze. I don't know if it was pride or pure stubbornness, but right then, something inside me decided that if they thought I wasn't in their league, I'd build my own damn league. A year later, Maya and I were talking about marriage. I was ecstatic. She was the person I wanted to wake up next to every day. But there was a catch. Her parents insisted on a prenup. They framed it like they were protecting her, saying things like, "It's just standard in our family. We need to ensure she's secure." What they didn't realize was that I had no issue with the prenup as long as it was fair. In fact, my closest friend Daniel was a corporate lawyer, and when I told him about their demand, he smiled in that dangerous way that meant he was already planning something. "We'll give them a prenup," Daniel said, "but it's going to protect you too. Trust me, they won't even read it properly." And they didn't. Their arrogance was their blind spot. They assumed I was the one being let in to their wealth, so they didn't care about clauses that locked away all future earnings under my sole ownership unless explicitly shared. When the papers were signed, I had no idea how important that little stack of legal jargon would become. The wedding was tense. Maya looked beautiful, radiant even, but her parents wore smiles so forced you could practically hear their teeth grinding. The family photos looked more like a hostage situation than a celebration. Caleb spent most of the reception hitting on the bridesmaids. Evelyn complained about the wine selection. Richard barely spoke to me except to comment on how interesting my choice of suit was, like it was some kind of budget knockoff. But I didn't care. I had Maya, and that was enough. For the first year of our marriage, we didn't see them much. Holidays, birthdays, the bare minimum. I poured myself into my business, which was starting to gain traction. Late nights turned into early mornings, and slowly, things began to shift. Big clients started calling. Our revenue doubled, then tripled. I hired more staff, moved into a real office, and signed a partnership deal that would change everything. But back then, I wasn't thinking about revenge, or even about proving them wrong. I was just focused on building a future for us. What I didn't realize was that every success, every step forward, was setting the stage for a confrontation I couldn't avoid forever. By the time our third anniversary rolled around, my business had exploded. My net worth had more than 20 times what it had been when we married. We bought a beautiful home, nothing absurd, but ours. Maya and I were happier than ever, and that's when the invitations started coming again. Family brunches, just stopping by, visits, random phone calls from people who had ignored me for years. Suddenly, checking in. It didn't take a genius to figure out why. They had decided I was finally in their league. But as I'd soon find out, they weren't just back to play nice, they were back with a plan. When I was broke, my wife's family barely remembered my name. When I became wealthy, they suddenly remembered my birthday. Twice. The first reconnection came in the form of an engraved invitation to Evelyn's 55th birthday gala. It was a black tie affair at some country club, so exclusive they probably screened your bloodline before letting you in. I considered skipping it, but Maya wanted to go. Maybe they've changed, she said. Ever the optimist, they hadn't. When we arrived, the greetings were over the top but hollow. Evelyn clutched my arm like we were old friends, her smile blinding under the chandelier light. Richard clapped me on the back, calling me son, as if the last 5 years of snide remarks had never happened. Caleb, now sporting an expensive watch and the same smug smirk, gave me the kind of handshake that was more about crushing knuckles than saying hello. The conversations that night all seemed to orbit one subject, my business. So, I heard you've had quite a year, Richard said between sips of champagne. We've been lucky, I replied, keeping it vague. Luck favors the prepared, he said with a sly smile. And the prepared share with family. It was subtle, almost a throwaway line, but I caught the glint in his eye. Over the next few months, their presence in our lives grew. Weekly calls from Evelyn, sudden dinner invitations, casual drop-ins to see how we're doing. On the surface, it might have looked like a family reconnecting, but underneath, it felt like reconnaissance. I'd catch them asking Maya oddly specific questions when they thought I wasn't listening. Do you have joint accounts yet? Has he put your name on the business? It's not healthy to have everything in his name, sweetie. Maya would brush them off, but I could see the conversations bothered her. Not because she agreed with them, but because she hated being in the middle. Then came the Christmas incident. We were at their house, exchanging gifts in the living room. Evelyn handed Maya an envelope. Inside was a glossy brochure for some family estate planning service. It's time you two started thinking long-term, Evelyn said in her most motherly voice. You know, wills, trusts, maybe updating that prenup so it reflects your real life now. I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. They weren't even pretending anymore. That night, after we got home, I told Maya exactly what I thought was happening. They want you to push me into changing the prenup, I said. I know, she admitted quietly. They've been hinting at it for months. And what do you think? I think they're ridiculous. We don't need to change anything. We're fine. I believed her. I trusted her. But I also knew her family wasn't going to stop. A few weeks later, I got proof. I'd stayed late at the office one night, and when I got home, Maya was in the kitchen, on the phone with her mother. She didn't hear me come in. I caught enough of the conversation to understand the gist. Evelyn was telling her, in a tone that walked the line between persuasion and manipulation, that you have to think about your future. What if something happens? You should be protected. He'll understand if you love him. I stepped into the kitchen, and Maya's eyes went wide. Hey, Mom, I'll call you back, she said quickly, hanging up. So, that's where we are now? I asked. It's not me, it's them, she insisted. They're obsessed with this. She wasn't lying, but that didn't make me feel any better. From that moment on, I decided to stop reacting and start preparing. I called Daniel, my lawyer friend, and explained everything. They're pushing to change the prenup, I said, and I think they'll try to corner me into it. Let them try, Daniel said. In fact, give them just enough rope to hang themselves. Meanwhile, we're going to make sure that even if they somehow got your wife to agree, they'd still get nothing. Over the next month, Daniel and I were quietly in the background. I restructured my companies, moved certain assets into protected entities, and created legal layers so complex that even the IRS would need a map. It wasn't about hiding money from my wife. She knew exactly what I was doing. It was about making sure her family couldn't touch it. Then, just when I thought they might have backed off, we got the invitation. A family dinner at Richard and Evelyn's house. No special occasion, no holiday. Just, come over, we'd love to talk. Maya and I exchanged a look when we read it. You know what this is, I said. Yeah, she sighed. They're going to try it. I smiled. Good, I've been waiting for this. The thing about people like my in-laws is that they never attack head-on. They wrap their intentions in silk and serve them with dessert. They want you to believe it's all your idea, so when they take from you, you thank them for it. That's why I knew this family dinner wasn't going to be a screaming match. It was going to be a performance. The week leading up to it, I noticed small signs that Maya's family was warming up for something big. Evelyn sent her flowers just because. Richard texted me a link to some luxury vacation spot with the note, "You two should treat yourselves, life's too short." Caleb, of all people, sent me a friend request on LinkedIn. If that wasn't a sign of the apocalypse, I didn't know what was. Daniel and I had finished all the legal work by then. My companies were now separate legal entities, my personal assets shielded behind airtight trusts, and the prenup had an iron lock on it that made Fort Knox look casual. Even if a court somehow threw it out, the way things were structured meant that, Practically speaking, my in-laws could try until their dying breath and still end up with nothing. The best part, Maya knew everything. We'd spent late nights in the living room, wine glasses in hand, going over the details. "You don't have to do all this," she'd said once. "I know," I told her, "but I want to, not just for me, for us." The night of the dinner, we drove to her parents' estate in tense silence. Maya was fiddling with her necklace, a habit she had when she was nervous. "You don't have to say anything tonight," I told her. "Let me handle it. And if they get aggressive," I smiled, "then I'll get educational." We pulled up to the house, and before we could even ring the bell, Evelyn opened the door. Her face lit up like we were celebrities on her red carpet. "Oh, you're here. Come in, come in." The dining room was set like something out of a magazine, spread crystal glasses, silverware so polished I could see my reflection, candles flickering just so. And right in the middle of the table sat a neatly stacked folder with a gold clip. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Dinner started innocently enough. Light conversation about vacations, mutual acquaintances, a little gossip about some poor couple going through a messy divorce. It was all small talk foreplay for the real topic. Finally, as the plates were being cleared, Richard leaned back in his chair and gave me the kind of look a chess player gives before moving in for checkmate. "You know," he began, "we've been thinking. The prenup made sense back when you were just starting out. But life changes. You've done incredibly well, and we're all proud of you for that. We think it's time to update the agreement so it reflects reality." There it was, smooth, practiced, like he was suggesting we repaint the living room. Evelyn chimed in, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "It's really about trust, dear. If you love each other, you shouldn't need such restrictive terms. It's not romantic." Caleb, ever the subtle one, muttered, "Yeah, kinda sounds like you don't trust her." I didn't take the bait. I just smiled, reached for a wine glass, and took a slow sip. "Interesting," I said finally. "You've all given this a lot of thought." Richard nodded, mistaking my calm for hesitation. "We have. And we've even had some friends in the legal world look over your original agreement. They agree it's outdated." I almost laughed. Whoever they'd shown it to clearly hadn't read the fine print, or maybe they had, and they realized it was useless to them. Maya shifted uncomfortably beside me, but I put a hand on her knee under the table. "I appreciate the concern," I said. "But you see, I've been doing some thinking of my own." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Evelyn tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Oh, and what's that?" I set my glass down carefully, looked each of them in the eye, and gave the faintest hint of a smile. "That maybe tonight's the perfect time to put all our cards on the table." Their expressions shifted intrigue mixed with uncertainty. Richard straightened in his chair. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her napkin. Caleb stopped smirking. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. I leaned back, perfectly relaxed. "So why don't we talk about what I've been up to lately?" And that's where I stopped. Because the next words out of my mouth weren't going to just answer their question. They were going to end their game entirely. Update 1. If you've ever watched a poker game where one player slowly, deliberately pushes all their chips into the middle of the table, you know the kind of energy I was aiming for. Except my chips were years of preparation, and my opponents had no idea they were already playing a losing hand. I let the silence stretch a little longer, swirling the wine in my glass. Evelyn was the first to break. "Darling," she said in that saccharine tone that always meant trouble, "we just want what's best for you and Maya. No one's attacking you here." I nodded slowly. "Oh, I know. You're just concerned." Richard leaned forward, elbows on the table, wearing what he probably thought was his reasonable businessman face. "Exactly. The way things are set up now, it's unbalanced. If something happened, it would take ages for Maya to access what's rightfully hers. We think—" I raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "See, that's where you're mistaken. You're assuming she can't access anything, but that's not true. In fact, she's more protected now than she's ever been." Evelyn's brows furrowed. Caleb glanced between us, already looking bored. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a slim folder, the same kind they'd placed in the center of the table earlier. Only mine wasn't filled with their wishful thinking. "This," I said, sliding it across the table toward Maya, "is a detailed outline of how our finances are structured. You can read it later, but the short version is, everything I own is protected, and anything with your name on it is untouchable by anyone else." Richard blinked. "Untouchable by anyone else?" I smiled. "Meaning, no court, no lawyer, and no well-meaning family member can take a dime from you. It's yours, always." That got their attention. Evelyn's lips tightened, the mask slipping just a little. Richard tried another angle. "That's fine, but surely you see how updating the prenup could simplify things?" "Richard," I said, voice steady, "that prenup is the single most bulletproof document I've ever signed, and I know you've been showing it to your friends in the legal world. I'd bet they didn't mention the clause on page 7. He froze. Evelyn frowned. "What clause?" "The one that states all future earnings remain the sole property of the person who earned them, unless I personally sign them over, which I haven't." which I won't. Caleb let out a low whistle. Damn, you really lawyered up, huh? I leaned back in my chair, still calm. You see, I didn't marry Maya for her family's money. I married her because she's the one person in my life who's never cared about mine, which is why she's the only person I've ever made a promise to and kept. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. And what promise is that? That no one would ever use her as a pawn to get to me. Not even her own parents. The air in the room shifted. Maya's hand slipped into mine under the table, her grip firm. Richard sat back, realizing he wasn't winning this one. So, you're saying you won't even consider it? I'm saying, I replied. This conversation is over, and if you bring it up again, the next folder I slide across the table won't be financial documents. It'll be a record of every attempt you've made to manipulate my wife into breaking a legal agreement. That one landed. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Caleb, for once, kept his mouth shut. We finished dessert in strained silence. When we left, Richard shook my hand stiffly. Evelyn offered a tight smile, and Caleb muttered something about me being cold-blooded. As we drove home, Maya let out a long breath. I think you just nuked whatever was left of their opinion of you. Good, I said. Now they know exactly where we stand. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they'd back off. But if there's one thing I've learned about people who are used to getting their way, it's this. When you shut one door, they'll try to sneak in through a window. And a few weeks later, they did exactly that. Update 2. By the time I got back home, my phone had blown up with missed calls and messages. Half from Emily, half from family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, Emily had gone on a social media spree, posting about my cruel betrayal and the greed that destroyed our love. She even uploaded a photo of me at the engagement dinner, smiling with a caption like, "I'd just stolen candy from a kid." The comment section was split. Half her friends calling me heartless, the other half, mostly my old high school acquaintances, asking, "Wait, wasn't Emily the one who used to cheat on everyone she dated?" The internet doesn't forget. I ignored all of it until my mom called, not to check if I was okay, but to ask, "What on earth did you do to Emily?" The irony nearly made me choke. This is the same woman who didn't believe me when I told her Emily was manipulative, but now she was treating me like a criminal for finally walking away. The kicker? Emily had apparently gone crying to my sister, who then called me screaming that I'd humiliated the family. I told her Emily humiliated herself. I just stopped cleaning up after her mess. She didn't like that answer. The real twist came the next day when one of Emily's closest friends, one of the ones I'd kept things strictly platonic with, sent me a DM. She said she knew the truth about Emily's behavior and she had proof. Screenshots, videos, conversations Emily had with other guys while we were still engaged. She offered to meet up in person. I agreed, but part of me couldn't shake the thought. Was this a setup, or was Emily's own circle finally turning on her? Either way, I was about to find out. Update 3. I didn't think things could get any more chaotic, but the last 48 hours have felt like living inside a pressure cooker. After I walked out of that dinner, I decided to stop reacting emotionally and start being strategic. Every move from here on had to be calculated, not just for payback, but to make sure no one could twist the story later to make me the villain. First thing the next morning, I visited my lawyer again. She looked at me like she could already tell something new had happened. I laid out the fresh details, the text my sister sent after I left, the family group chat blowing up with guilt-tripping messages, and the fact that my cousin had accidentally leaked the story to half the extended family. My lawyer's eyes narrowed. "This is good," she said. "Messy, but good. It's proof they're trying to manipulate you and damage your reputation. Keep every single word documented." So that's what I did. I started collecting screenshots, saving voicemails, even recording phone calls where it was legal. Every new guilt trip, every insult, every half-baked apology went into a growing folder I labeled Family PR Disaster. The real twist came that evening when I got an email from a journalist. They claimed they'd been tipped off about a wealthy man refusing to help his sick sister and wanted my side of the story before publishing. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I traced where the leak came from, and guess what? The journalist admitted, off the record, that the source was someone close to the family who feels morally outraged. Translation, my own parents. That was the moment the gloves came off. I sent a calm, factual response to the journalist, attaching some of the very same screenshots I'd collected. I didn't go full nuclear, not yet, but I made sure they saw just enough to realize this wasn't the clean little sob story my parents were trying to sell. The article that came out the next day was surprisingly balanced, painting me as a man caught between loyalty to family and a history of unresolved betrayal. My parents were livid. My sister sent me a voice note that started with, "I can't believe you," and devolved into crying, then shouting, then more crying. But here's the part no one expected 2 hours after the article went live. My aunt, the only one who had ever really been there for me, called. She said she had something I needed to see, something that might end this once and for all. She wouldn't say what it was over the phone, but told me to come over tomorrow. And if I know my aunt, whatever she's holding on to isn't just family gossip, it's dynamite.